For me, 1968, just at an autobiographical note, was the time in my own life when I entered politics. And I can be very precise about the moment that my life became consummately political. It was on the evening of April the 4th, 1968. I was 17 years old. I was a senior in high school, and I learned over my car radio that Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. I stayed up most of that night really feeling deeply that Martin's dream of nonviolent democratic change within the country had been irrevocably lost. And what I would later call the Black freedom struggle would not be able to replace its most articulate spokesperson. And for teenagers in high school, I was a senior at the time, like myself, and college students who opposed the war in Vietnam and supported the end of U.S. military occupation or invasion of Southeast Asia. Martin had become, in effect, in the past year, the most important figure, anti-war figure, that we related to. At the time, I had a newspaper column in the local black paper, and I was trying to, as best I could, clip information from the media, from newspapers, as well as from what I could see on television, regarding what was happening throughout the United States in response to Martin's murder. My parents, my mother in particular, had suggested that I travel to Atlanta to cover the funeral services for Martin Luther King Jr. for the local black newspaper. She argued that homework and housework that I did after school could wait for a few days. I'd never flown on an airplane in my life, and when I arrived at Dayton, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. When I arrived in Dayton's modest airport, I was thrilled with the spirit of high adventure and great expectation. The flight arrived late Monday afternoon in Atlanta, Hartfield's airport, and my dad's youngest sister, Aunt Alice, who lived outside the city, picked me up. I was given a small transit map of the city indicating what public bus routes I would need to take in order to get to Ebenezer Baptist Church on Auburn Avenue. I don't recall sleeping the next night, and well before 5 a.m. I stood alone on a rural country road waiting for an early morning bus that took workers into the city. After reaching downtown, I followed the bus map carefully and walked down Auburn Avenue, down the hill. The sun was just coming up and the air was still crisp and cool as I saw Ebenezer. I walked up to the front entrance. The door was locked. I sat down to rest. And I was the first person there to witness history being made that day. About 7 a.m., roughly 50 people by now had arrived at the historic church. Reverend Ralph David Abernathy arrived, and standing on the hood of his automobile, he explained to us that the sanctuary could only hold no more than 800 people, and that all of us would have to listen to the services outside. Over the next 3 hours, tens of thousands of people began to gather around the church, crushing me against the front door. By the time the funeral services had concluded, roughly around noon, it was already hot and muggy. Anywhere from 60 to 100,000 people surrounded the church. King's body was carried to a specially prepared hearse, a simple farm wagon hitched up to several mules.